one common thing that all humans encounter, and they will encounter this probably multiple times in their lifetime.
Death.
Not multiple times. They do all encounter, but maybe not multiple times. Oh, you're right. It could be other people though. It doesn't have to be their own. One thing that everybody encounters, they do encounter love. But the one thing I'm going to talk about today is arguments. Yes, we all encounter arguments. How many of you encountered an argument today? Or yesterday, or even this week? We all do it. It happens at some point. And when you boil it down to the basics of an argument, what is the one thing that it is caused by? Disagreements. Good job. Way to go. Yeah, disagreements. And when those disagreements are not handled correctly, it can lead to anger and thoughts of, I'm right, why can't they see that? And the thoughts of, I don't understand their perspective because mine is the only one that obviously logically makes sense. Hello? And then you can see there's two different pathways you can take when you have a disagreement. You can go the peaceful way, or you can go the way full of malice and thoughts of my way or the highway. Now, Acts 21 and 22 is the story of Paul. And in the story, it demonstrates both pathways. Now, anger builds throughout this whole passage, these two chapters, and it starts off with one single disagreement. So within chapter 21 of Acts, Paul comes back to Jerusalem from doing his missionary work, and he comes back to Jerusalem, and he finds out that these Jews do not disagree with what he's teaching, and they do not think that they are respecting their Jewish tradition and laws. And so these elders of the church in Jerusalem, they're like, okay, come here, Paul. This is how we can solve this. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into the temple. You're going to do a 7-day ritual. You are going to make some vows, and you're going to represent and show that you respect you respect all of the Jewish laws and everything they love. And so Paul's like, okay, I want to keep peace. I want to keep unity. And that is one thing that Paul strives throughout all of his teaching. And even in 1 Corinthians 9:20, he writes, to the Jews I became a Jew to win the Jews. And to those under the law I became like those under the law to win those under the law. And so Paul's main idea is to keep the peace, keep the unity. So he agrees to the elders and he's like, okay, I'll go into the church or into the temple and I will do this 7-day ritual vow thing. Okay? So Paul is near the end of his vows. He's probably like maybe 1 or 2 days away from finishing it, from completing it, showing the Jews, yes, I respect you. It is great. And these Jews in the temple, they see him, they assume that they get angry, and then they mob him. Why? What do they assume? Well, the Jews, Paul's over there, he's doing his ritual, he's doing his vows, they see him. Now, they knew before that he was with the Gentiles before he came to Jerusalem. So all they did, they were like, oh, he was with Gentiles. He must have brought Gentiles into the temple. And then Gentiles into the temple, they did not mix Jews and Gentiles. They were not compadres. And so they assume, oh, these Gentiles in here, we are now angry. That is not right. We are going to stand for what is right. And so they gather each other. They're like, Paul did this. He brought a Gentile in here. And they're getting everyone onto the bandwagon. And they go and mob and beat Paul. And it even says in verse 30 through 32, the whole city was rocked by these accusations. And a great riot followed. Paul was grabbed and dragged out of the temple, and immediately the gates were closed behind him. As they were trying to kill him, word reached the commander of the Roman regiment that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately called out his soldiers and officers and ran down among the crowd. When the mob saw the commander and the troops coming, they stopped beating Paul. They would have continued if the commander had not come. And it makes me think of like a mother walking into a room with her children fighting. She's like, all right guys, who started it? What's going on? Break it up. What are you doing? And when the commander gets there, nobody can tell why they are fighting. In verse 34, some shouted one thing, some shouted another. Since he couldn't find the truth in all of the uproar and confusion, he ordered that Paul be taken to the fortress where he would be put on trial. So they all just jumped on the bandwagon. Nobody knew why they were beating him. They're like, oh, okay, we're mad, we're angry, let's get him. And so in this trial, Paul asked for permission to speak. And in chapter 22, or in chapter 21, it leads into 22. Chapter 21, verse 40, the commander agreed to let Paul speak. So Paul stood on the stairs and motioned to the people to be quiet. Soon a deep silence enveloped the crowd, and he addressed them in their own language, Aramaic. Brothers and esteemed fathers, Paul said, listen to me as I offer my defense. When they heard him speaking in their own language, the silence was even greater. And Paul begins to tell about his testimony to the Jews, how he was a chief of sinners. He killed and persecuted Christians left and right. And he's telling all these Jews, guys, I was one of you. I was you who had this small perspective. And God changed me, the hardest of hearts, into a lover of Christ. And Paul has them engaged and trapped into his beautiful testimony. And then Paul begins to talk about how the Lord has called him to preach to the Gentiles. The crowd listened until Paul said that word in verse 22. Then they all began to shout, away with such a fellow! He isn't fit to live! Then they yelled and threw off their coats, tossed handfuls of dust into the air. Their pride and their hate for Paul and his teaching blinded them from seeing the beauty that God had to offer them. Their perspective was so closed from their pride. Now I have a video clip from the movie Storks, and I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a cute little movie, and the background of this is that girl and the bird is trying to deliver the baby to their family. And I thought this scene had very much relevance to what happened to Paul and the Jews.
Listen, I'm the alpha. I'm gonna eat this thing first. I'm gonna be the new alpha. No, there's no need for a new alpha. I'm the alpha. You're not even a beta. I'm the alpha. What just happened there? What did that thing just do? What's that? I'm sorry, where were we? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna devour this thing. I'm gonna bite her arm clean off. You didn't bite her arm clean off. It tastes like flowers. Okay, stand aside. Look at you. Look what you did. I did the same thing you did.
Alright, so even though that's very cute, but when you look at the basis of it, this has such relation to what happened to Paul. Now, the wolves, they're angry, they bring Tiny Thing, the little baby, and they're like, we're gonna kill her, we're gonna rip her to shreds, right? Just as the Jews brought Paul and were like, we're gonna kill him, we're gonna beat him to death, we're just gonna destroy him and get rid of this nuisance once and for all. And then, what happens? The baby laughs, and they turn from this angry wolves to, aww, wow. And the same thing happened with Paul and the Jews. Paul began to tell his beautiful testimony, and because of that, they were like, wow, we have to listen to this. And then as soon as the baby stopped laughing and being cute, they were like, what? Okay, what just happened? Okay, we're angry again. And then it's the same thing that happened. The Jews heard one word, Gentiles, and it set them off again to their anger. And it's funny to see how quickly pride and hate can suck you back into anger that you had. And when I look at with my little brothers back when they were tiny, and then even little kids, any little kids, they'll get angry at you over small things, right? And then they'll be like, and they'll come hit you, right? And they're like, I'm so mad at you for something small that doesn't really matter. And what I would do to my little brothers is I would be like, yeah, give me a high five. So I would turn their slapping at me into like a fun game of high fives. And most of the time, they'd be like, I'm so mad at you, like, it was the thought of, come on kid, make up your mind, are you mad or are you happy? I don't know. And even like when I look at my life today, I do it too. I think, can't you just let me be angry? Let me wallow in my self-pity? Can't you just let me feel sorry for myself? But never do I think, just let it go. And so I have these handouts for you guys today. Hopefully we'll pass these out fast. But I received this slip of paper from my grandmother like a couple years ago, and I read it. I thought it was great, so I slipped it in my Bible, kept it as a bookmark, something to just refer back to now and then. And I thought, as you see at the top, Mother Teresa gave these rules to her sisters to help them develop the virtue of humility. And I thought this went very well with the message today, because what is the opposite of pride? Humility. And even though these bullet points aren't numbered, bullet point 6, 7, and 12, I felt went very well with this message and about pride and hate. So number 6, accept censures even if unmerited. Paul even was an example of this with the elders in the beginning. The elders were like, can't you just respect the Jewish laws, okay? Because like they didn't think Paul was doing it right, but Paul was like, okay, fine, I will do that. I will keep the peace, and I will give into the will of others, just as bullet number 7 says. And then 12, give into discussions even when you are right. And that is the hardest thing to do. You're right. You want to be right. You want to show everybody you're right. But just give in, because who cares? In the bigger picture of it all, who cares? And so I ask that you guys hopefully can keep this, put it in your Bible, use it as a bookmark as I have, and you can refer back to it now and then to reevaluate yourselves and ask yourselves, how are you showing humility? Are you representing it well? Are you holding on to your pride and hate? Or are you choosing